Well, hello, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Kara, and this is a channel that I use to document a year-long low-buy project for the year 2020. I do that to help myself keep a really tight budget. I do that because I'm paying off student loans, and this month has been excellent. So for the first time, I did weekly check-ins instead of picking a theme to talk about in August. So this month, I just I didn't have much to say most weeks, but just yes, I'm keeping my low buy rules and see you in a week was the gist of most of it. But I wanted to, and now near the end of the month, I've paid all my bills. I wanted to share how the month went, comparing what I had planned and what I had hoped to do with what actually was accomplished. And for the most part, it's a good picture. I learned a few things. And so I have, as ever, a little list of all the things I want to make sure that I mention. But mostly it was a great month and it was fun to have those check-ins. It actually helped to keep my low buy project kind of on my mind. And it did help with discipline around impulse buys and things that I've struggled with. And if you've watched this channel at all, you probably roll your eyes every month like, come on, Kara, get it together. Quit. At least I sure want to say to myself, can't you quit caving in and having a few impulse buys every month? But it was still a really good month and I'm excited. So some of the highlights of the month were that at the very end of July, I had sold a vehicle that I had had. I used to own a little scooter, a Honda Ruckus, and I sold that at the very end of July and was able to use that money in August, obviously then. It's kind of bittersweet to let it go. It was very fun to have a scooter, but I had used it well and I had taken good care of it. And the couple who purchased it, they actually bought it for just a little more than I had paid for it. So if you compare my price when I purchased it in 2016, plus all the gas I put into it, which isn't much because it had a 1 gallon tank and then you'd get around every single time 100 miles per gallon. All of the fuel that I put in it, which I actually tracked, and the price that I paid for it when I sold it, I broke even in that regard. Although, of course, I had to register it and insure it, which bumped up my expense a tiny bit more. So I very nearly broke even having had that vehicle for 4 years, and it was really fun. And I'd actually never sold a vehicle before, so it was also a little bit of a learning experience and not difficult or complicated at all. Um, then, when I got both of my paychecks throughout this month, that I'd had just a smidge of overtime, and so that's nice because it's time and a half on top of some hazard pay that's already been added in because of the pandemic. So those paychecks were a little larger than I usually expect at this point, and that was nice. It was hard work. It is hard work to work at a natural food store right now. It's a lot of physical labor. It's a lot of planning around very sporadic, very sporadic seeming supply issues. And today is actually another example of how strange it is. I usually am not sitting at home. It is Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. I'm usually at work, but our truck today is going to be so late that there's no reason for me to go in for a couple more hours and then begin the work of unloading our shipment and checking it in. And then actually, I'll be working quite late tonight because I turn around and need to make an order again that will hopefully show up on time on Friday. So sometimes my life is a little pushed around by something that probably happened in Portland or somewhere on the road for that driver. But I'm not going to go to work early and stand around and not have anything to do. That would be silly. Anyway, there's all these different things that happen throughout the week that sometimes mean I end up not really planning on it, but accumulating a little bit of extra time. And sometimes my week ends up a little bit shy of full time. So these weeks where I get overtime, it is helpful. Blah, 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 blah. This month was my birthday and I turned 38. And I feel great about that. I have been very healthy for the last few years of my life. I've been working hard to reduce the stress in my lifestyle and to just keep things simple. And part of that was moving to Sandpoint and taking a job that is, in many people's eyes, just a job. I felt that way about it when I began, and I have come to value my coworkers. And as I learn more and more about the food industry and grocery and distribution, I find it very interesting. Um, and so I'm now also actually sort of personally invested in the work, and I care about it going well, and I care about learning as much as I can. Um, and I will be perfectly happy to keep working in that world for a few more years. I don't really want to work forever. I would love to keep my lifestyle simple enough that in the future I could work part-time or less for wages and keep it that simple. Maybe that could happen. So anyway, it was my birthday. I went on a bike ride with some friends, and it was really fun because, I mean, we kept everything outside. We kept socially distanced, but they brought birthday party hats, and we taped them onto our bike helmets and took our bike ride. And a few people driving cars noticed the hats and would yell out their windows, "Happy birthday!" And so that was kind of fun. I had like a little tiny birthday biking parade. Um, and another day this month, I went out into the mountains with my mom, and we were picking berries because my mom makes wonderful syrup and jam, and I like being outside, of course, and picking berries is fun. While we were driving out to where I knew we could find some huckleberries, we saw a mountain lion, and it was so beautiful. So we were driving this dirt road, and there's a slope off to, deep mountain valley, and uh, this mountain lion came up out of the woods and stood for just a second on the road and then ran down the road ahead of us for, just 20 some yards. I've never seen one before, and it was so beautiful, and uh, it had such a presence to it. This is an animal completely at home, completely self-sufficient, and uh, looked, how like if a deer sees you, a deer looks alarmed. This animal was just annoyed. Like, this cat was in control of itself and is not afraid of anything out there, including random vehicles, and just kind of was like, "Ugh, what are you doing?" And then it dove back into the woods to get away from our dusty, stinky vehicle. It was so gorgeous. It was definitely a lifetime highlight. I had never seen a mountain lion before, and to be able to see one relatively close, I mean, it was maybe 15 yards ahead of us. We saw very detailed, gorgeous coloring, all tawny and dark brown, and a long tail, much longer than I imagined. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous animal, and I don't know if I'll ever see one again. They're known for being very secretive. So that was just such a great moment just a couple days ago. I'm still amazed at that. So there's just a lot of good stuff that happens with a simple life and taking the time to be outside and pay attention to what's real and what's right in front of you and not get caught up in too much else. That's what I try to do. So it's been a great week or month. And my budget, I have for the most part kept my budget. Now, there is an aspect of this month's bills that I am shocked and embarrassed by, which was that my credit card bill was again large. And I went looking through the statement of it and where did all of this happen. And there were around, this is silly, there were over $100 of little things, $5, $2, $8. And I remember most of those and like what I decided to do that day. And I gave in and I bought something. And for the most part, it was I went and had a beer at a local brewery. I bought ice cream for my birthday, but I had mentioned that in one of these previous videos. But there were Oh, computer nearly died. There were a significant number of small charges that I actually just can't remember. And that means, like you can probably guess, that means I wasn't keeping rule number one, which is to leave access to my money at home. I did that consciously more this month, but obviously still I carried my money with me enough times to rack up a credit card bill bigger than it should have been. I did that. Another thing that made that bill larger than usual was I have this old neck injury from carrying something overhead and compressing my neck. And sometimes, depending on what I do, it gets a little irritated. And that happened in late July. And I went and for a couple of weeks in a row, I saw a massage and sort of body work specialist. So I had those charges on my card. Thankfully, they just allow, a cash payment. It doesn't have to go through insurance or anything complicated. But I needed to pay that person. They helped me, and my neck got back to normal. And also, I had a much larger than usual food expense. And I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, where I had been ordering meat through a local meat processor, and there were these delays because there's so much demand right now, and they're not harvesting their beef any faster than usual because they, of course, need to protect the quality of their herd, and I want them to have cows in the future, so I don't want them to take the whole herd this year. So their production was slower, and when they called to say that my order was ready, they actually had 2 orders ready at the same time, and so I ended up paying for a lot of food all at once in this month when I normally would have had that spread across maybe even 3 months of food purchases. So a significant amount of that credit card bill was food that I wouldn't have normally bought all at once. Other than that, though, I kind of screwed up and I didn't keep rule number one perfectly. I think those were sort of the anomalies in that credit card bill. Let's look. What's on the list? So yeah, there's kind of a review of my actual versus what I had planned to spend, and the difference is close to $1,000, and that is a good reality check and a shock to me to look at, even accounting for the fact that I went and saw somebody who helped me medically or physically, I guess. The food story and how that's a significant difference. But still, there's things that I can't justify that racked up my actual expenses close to $1,000 more than should have. And that's $1,000-some, just under $1,000 that could have gone on my debt. So as ever, my ideal and then what I actually accomplish, there's a gap. There is a gap, and that keeps me sort of motivated and focused. It used to defeat me, and I would kind of throw up my hands and say, well, whatever. But now it doesn't defeat me, but it definitely helps me see my reality. So let's get into the good news. Enough of this, like how I disappointed myself. But there's still a lot of really good news this month. When I went to pay my student loans, because I'd had a little bit more income and I had sold that vehicle, and I counted that as income. So when we look at my percentage of income used, it includes that vehicle sold as part of the income. When I went to pay my student loans this month, I had more money on hand than usual, and that was so great because I'm still working towards paying off as much as I can while there's no interest on my larger loan. This month I paid $3,475 on debt, and that is 73% of my income, my take-home pay. So even with the ridiculousness that I performed, I still did well and still nearly made my goal of 75% income used. So yeah, $3,475 paid on debt, and that was 73% of my income. Um, and that feels great. That feels great, and it's very motivating to keep going. I keep checking in on the website of my loan holder because I can't wait to see when that payment actually gets processed fully. It's in this pending status for it's been 4 business days. Come on, Navient, post it already. My bank has it figured out. Why can't you? But when that transaction finally posts and the balance of my loan drops visibly and I get to see the new balance, I'm so excited because taking a chunk off of it like that all at once is really fun to watch happen. Anyway, while there's been no interest, so in April with the CARES Act until the end of September, there's no interest on loans held by the Department of Education, which is my larger balance at the time. It's now the smaller balance, but it does have the higher interest rate, and so it's awesome that that's what has had no interest accruing for these months. I set out to pay off at least $10,000 of the principal while there's no interest, and I've now surpassed $10,000 with the money of the ruckus involved. So when the 10K is done, and it will be done at the end of next month when I make my payments, I will have paid off $10,000 of debt using my own income. And then the money that was from that vehicle sold that I did get to throw at it, that's just icing on a really great cake. And in the meantime, there's a couple things that affect me or could affect me and might affect you. The 0% interest has been extended to the end of the year. So there's also October, November, and December with no interest. And if I paid off $10,000 in 6 months, I should be able to at least pay off $5,000 in 3 more months. So I'm calling it the Can't Stop, Won't Stop 5K to get through the end of the year. And that feels great. It feels great knowing that the 10K has happened and worked, and I still get to throw more at it in September and just blow that 10K challenge out of the water. And then October, November, December, keep on going and try to beat paying off $5,000 more while there's no interest. It's really motivating. I hope that if you have student loans in the Department of Education that have not had interest for these months, I hope that you have been taking advantage of that, because it's really great to see how much principal you can actually hit. Like when there was interest on these loans, my balance was high enough that the interest was adding between $8 and $9 a day. And I would make a payment and then it would grow a little bit every, $8 and $9 a day until I made the next payment. And then it would grow $8, $9 a day until I made the next payment. So it really slows you down. That's $300 a month, somewhere in the $250 to $300 a month on mine. Because, at least the balance was shrinking a little and that interest would accrue tiny bits less. But it's really hard to stay on top of that when what maybe some people can just barely afford just barely keeps up with that interest, and you're not getting to hit the principal. I really hope for your sake, if you've been in this situation, that you've been able to hit that principal, so that whenever the interest does come back, and I will not be surprised if that's just January 1, when that interest does come back, it can just do less damage. It can do less damage to you. Do your very best to pay while there's no interest. It's a great reprieve and very motivating, obviously, to me. So yeah, the 10K challenge going well, gonna blow it out of the water, and then through the end of the year, I'm gonna try to do at least 5K more. The other thing that my mom was telling me about, and I don't know if and when this might affect me, but she said something about how there's this payroll tax relief happening. So I don't know exactly what that means, but that some of my taxes might not be withheld in my pay, and then next year when it's tax season, I'll still be on the hook for it. And that sounds like it will suck. So I am going to, and I encourage you to watch your pay stubs. If you're working for wages right now, watch your pay stubs. And if you see that tax is not being withheld, make sure you set aside money, because I believe we will all still have to pay next year, and that will just really suck to have to suddenly come up with it out of pocket because of this weird tax tweak that, like, do they think that this will feel like relief to have a certain amount more in every paycheck? Yeah, that might feel like relief, but if we have to owe it again later anyway, that's gonna suck. So watch your pay stubs. I'll be watching mine. I haven't seen anything change so far, and it also sounds like something that employers might not do because of, like, how complicated is that to change everybody's paycheck and the schedule that they're doing things on, and then have to undo that again in a few months. So some employers might not even bother to do it, which is great, because then that's less headache. That's less headache for everybody overall. But just something to know could be going on. I don't know if that's really something that's been put into effect or not. But just kind of take a look at that pay stub in the coming weeks and make sure that if you need to, you set aside some money for taxes. I'm trying to think if there's more. It's been a good month. I paid off $3,475 of debt, and it was 73% of my income. I have had some great times outside with friends, socially distanced, nice and safe outdoors, plenty of air circulation. I saw a mountain lion, and I had a good birthday. So that's great. In the end of the month, so like I film on Mondays usually, or I try to, and then I post on Thursdays. When there's a fifth Monday in the month, which in August there is, on those fifth Mondays, I am going to do a book review. So next week, I will pick out some book off of my shelf that I have enjoyed and has had a big impact in my life. And next week, I'll tell you about that book. And then in September, I was thinking about telling a few more stories of my life and where I've come from and things that I've experienced. I have been, because I'm a little old lady apparently, when I'm knitting in the evenings, I've been listening to a few different YouTube channels where people are just telling the stories of their life, and it's really cool. And people, of course, people are super interesting, and I don't know if I'm as interesting, but I think in September I'm gonna just try to tell a few more personal stories about maybe my previous career, about different places that I've been able to live. I've lived all over the United States. I have lived in I've lived in one other country. I lived in Greece for a year, a long time ago. Had a lot of cool jobs, and kind of what has led me to this place of really desiring simplicity. So maybe I'll tell some stories, and yeah. So I'll see you next week with a book, and I will see you in September, hopefully with something interesting to tell you about. Have a good week, and I hope that you're doing well.